Welcome to the basketball podcast of Mid-America. I am your host, Anthony Christensen, joined by the lovely Ethan Westerman. No Bob Holt with us today. He couldn't be here with us. And then we've got Blake Sutton behind the scenes. We've got a little bit of news to talk about. Nothing too extreme. They just have, 9 more roster spots to fill. On the men's side, and then the women's basketball team has, how would you describe it?
They don't have their starting lineup from last year anymore, as of now, but so there's definitely some stuff there. But hey, at least the men's team now has I was seeing like John Rothstein, these people like Jeff Goodman, a lot of them like to drop like their way too early top 25s, and like Arkansas was just excluded from I think Rothstein does 45 teams, so it's like if you're an SEC school, like probably should make it in there. And, Arkansas for the longest time in these was just not in there. I'm like, hey, maybe they can now qualify. Maybe because they can now actually put a team on the floor. So
they do have a starting 5 and then 6-man extraordinaire Lawson Blake in the team. But Ethan, I assume you're doing well. Are you doing well?
Yeah, pretty good. Just think it's allergy season for probably most everyone. So that's not been fun. But aside from that, I mean, we're kind of in that time of the year where you can feel, it winding down, at least Arkansas sports. We're in the heat of, obviously, a lot of basketball news with the portal and whatnot, baseball, softball, I think outdoor track is going. So it's we got a few things still going, but we're almost at that time of year where you start talking about the next year. So pretty good. What about you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm a little tired. I'm going to the Bark in the Park tonight. Get the dog out there. He'll enjoy it. I always took him to the Evansville baseball games, and he always loved those. But Blake, how are you doing behind the scenes there?
I'm good, man. What kind of dog you got?
I have a 4-year-old black lab. He's ripped, actually. He's 83 pounds of pure muscle. He drags me around whenever I try to take him on walks or runs. But he's a very sweet boy.
What's his name?
Dallo. He's named after a soccer player. It's spelled D-A-L-O-T, so the T is silent. It's an odd name. But without further ado, let's get into some hoops, or I guess recruiting. So obviously last night, the Arkansas men's basketball team got the commitment of Tennessee big man Jonas Aidoo, who obviously had a pretty big game, here at Bud Walton Arena against Arkansas, and Eric Musselman called him one of the most improved players in the SEC, when he was here. So that's a pretty figuratively and literally big commit for Arkansas. I guess, Ethan, can you just talk about your thoughts on Jonas Aidoo's commitment and just kind of, what you think he brings?
Yeah, I mean, I remember that game. I think it was on Valentine's Day that Arkansas and Tennessee played at Bud Walton, and I think that was kind of a consensus thought is, I mean, everybody's kind of familiar with Jonas Aidoo, because he definitely has been in the league for a little bit, but in the SEC for a little bit, but it was just the improvement that you saw this year. I think it just stood off. It was okay, this is no longer just role player Jonas Aidoo that fits in on the Tennessee team. It was this is a guy who can actually kind of take over a game a little bit. I remember he had a good jump shot that his mid-range that game. I remember being impressed by. He made several jumpers. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's a pretty big pickup for Arkansas. I don't really think that right now we're in a phase of last year, whenever Arkansas or in years prior was getting these transfer commitments, it was kind of you needed to do your research, look these guys up a lot. Right now, Arkansas's landing guys that it's I feel you're pretty much in the loop college basketball fan, kind of knows who some of these guys are. Aidoo's definitely one. There's a lot of talk right now about Davis from FAU. John L. Davis, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about him. I think that a lot of people are familiar with him. So it's just a unique time right now to be keeping up with all this stuff, because it's Arkansas is talking to either really known transfers or McDonald's All-Americans. So you're just all right, well, there's not going to be any lack of like kind of. I know it's a college campus, but like it feels like you're getting some star power in here. So
Yeah, and talking about Jonas Aidoo, one of the things that I really remember from that game, and that was one of the first games I covered on this beat because I still consider myself new. Do you still consider me new? Am I still new?
yeah,
There we go. Young blood. From one of the things that I kind of remember from that game was just defensively how imposing he was, because that was right in the middle of when Mekhi Mitchell was really kind of taking over and really becoming the focal point of Arkansas's offense. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was held to 1 point that game, or one field goal or something like that. So defensively, I think Jonas Aidoo has a really strong presence in the paint, around the rim, and obviously you touched on the offensive side of things as well. And then just kind of talking about his fit kind of in the John Calipari system. I guess, can you just talk about what you kind of think of that? Do you think he uses them in kind of a similar way as Cal has kind of used, in his previous bigs, or what do you kind of think?
Well, one thing I remember for sure about Calipari's press conference and his introductories, he loves to joke about. I mean, everybody talked about it last year how bad they were defensively. But, like, they played a really fast pace and scored a ton of points and just flat out outscored. I mean, Arkansas knows it. That's exactly what happened to them. They just flat out outscore people. They'd outscored people a lot of times this year. And I think the Calipari is really good at, like, finding out what he needs to do with the pieces he has. I mean, so I'm not sure, like, what that will look like next year with Jonas Aidoo, but I assume, like, you're getting a very high caliber guy out of the portal. I would assume that probably going to try and see what his strengths were at Tennessee, what got him, in this position in the first place, and try and maybe do things that'll benefit him from what his game already is. A lot of times whenever you get like a high impact guy out of the portal, a lot of times people are like, oh, how can you I think the general thought is like, how can we make it, like, take him to the next level here? I'm like, he was already really good. Like, just what he did at Tennessee, it's almost like you just want to, like, can you maintain that here with other really good pieces around you? So yeah, long story short, I think that I'm not sure that it's going to look exactly like maybe how it did at Tennessee, but I would assume he'll take a lot of. I mean, Aidoo's going to be a big part of this team. There's just no way to look at it. You got an experienced guy on a team with a bunch of young guys. He'll be a very focal part of the team, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of one of those younger guys, obviously Zvonimir Ivicic. I believe I pronounced that correctly. I apologize to Zvonimir if I did not. He's following Calipari over to Kentucky. He was a freshman last season who had a lot of high upside, didn't play a whole lot. But everybody I talked to about him kind of talks about his potential and just kind of everything that he kind of has. He's 7'2", but he's mobile. He can beat you off the dribble. He's got a good deep shot. I believe he had 3 blocks in a game last season at one point. And really his debut, I believe it was against Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. He really kind of took the spotlight of that game. So obviously he didn't play a ton, but I guess can you just talk about what you think about Big Z, as the kids call him?
Well, he was the lone trooper here for a little bit. It was kind of funny whenever you have a whole, part of the appeal to go to one of these softball games recently was like, oh, Big Z will be here with Coach Calipari. It's like, I don't know, it was like he was going on his little like solo tour there for a little bit of just everybody was so excited about him. I think I think what I hear the most, just a consensus wide, is like the roof is crazy. Like for him, like it's like he might have only scratched the surface of like what he could become as a player. I mean, he's very raw, just like a lot of times how a lot of people who come from Europe are. Like it's just very raw. But if you can just like maybe fine tune some things and get him like more familiar with the American style of basketball. I mean, this dude is, clearly very like gifted from just a physical standpoint. I mean, he's huge. But I think whenever you watch Kentucky play last year, there were definitely a lot of moments that you're like, oh wow, like he was an easy one to kind of pick on whenever he did something wrong, because you just think like, oh, a guy this tall, this big, he should be able to score at will or whatever. And he had, for sure you could see like growing pains just to being in college basketball. But yeah, I think that he's one of the ones that huge upside for sure.
And do you think I one of the things that I kind of took away from it was, him being Calipari's first commit, here at Arkansas. I think that kind of speaks to how highly, Cal kind of thinks of him. I don't know if you agree with that or.
Yeah, and how highly he thinks of Cal, because from what I've read and heard and seen, it's like he came to Kentucky because of John Calipari. Like that was the appeal. So I think for him, it wasn't really even. It seemed like it wasn't even that much of a question for him if he wanted to go to Arkansas. Like as soon as Calipari accepted the Arkansas job, like he was like following Arkansas basketball and like liking stuff or whatever. So it was like immediately. It's almost like, oh yeah, I'm now Arkansas too because I'm here with Cal. So it kind of, that's how it felt like to me. Is there's probably just a really good bond there that made it pretty much a no-brainer for Big Z.
And then in terms of the other newcomers, not that there's a lot of returning pieces, at least to this point. Maybe somebody else comes back from the portal. But you got the three freshmen: Carter Knox, Billy Richmond, and why am I?
Boogie Flan.
Boogie Flan. Yeah, I can't believe brain fart. Apologies to all of the listeners. But you got those three guys coming in, all three rated at least at 4 stars. And it was kind of, I don't want to say a foregone conclusion, but pretty well accepted that, Cal was going to take, the majority of that freshman class that he had committed to Kentucky to Arkansas. Obviously, there's a couple of guys who aren't going to be following him. Jaden Quaintance just committed to Arizona State the other day. And Travis Perry sticking with Kentucky and Mark Pope. But now obviously the majority of those guys have committed and followed Cal here to Arkansas. And it's kind of hard to talk about these guys just because they haven't played at the college level yet. But I mean they're obviously they're all playing high level basketball in the AAU circuits and and whatnot. So I guess can you just talk about these high-profile freshmen, what you kind of think, and what you're kind of, I guess, expecting from a Cal freshman class from year one.
I mean, if there's anything we know from Cal's teams of the past, if he's recruiting these studs out of high school, like the goal is to get them to the NBA. Like these are NBA caliber. Like that is their potential. I mean, and if you look at like the basketball recruiting team rankings now, like on 24/7, Arkansas is in 6th right now. If you go to On3, Arkansas is 2nd. Like Arkansas only signed a few of these guys, and already their class ranking is like up there. So I mean, he's getting star players. I mean, you didn't have to watch the McDonald's All-American game too long this year they were all Kentucky then, but like, oh wow, he still has it as far as getting these elite high schoolers. I mean, end of the day, name of the game is we talked about this some with Arkansas's football program and baseball as well, as like there is a correlation to success and how many people you're sending to the professional league. I mean, talent is the name of the game. Arkansas hasn't been that great in football recent years, but you look at the NFL draft and not many picks coming out of the program. Baseball is the other way around. I mean, just turning out so many major leaguers, and you look and you're like, oh yeah, they're really competitive. I mean, you got to have talent, but it does seem like John Calipari's also maybe taking a more friendly approach than maybe he did at Kentucky with the transfer portal to complement these pieces. So, I don't know a ton about each of these. 3 guys that have signed so far, but you just got to kind of trust. I think that this guy, he knows how to identify talent that is next league talent.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, they're McDonald's All-American kind of caliber players, and these are the guys that Cal was getting in at Kentucky, since he got there, 15 years ago. I guess can you just talk about that kind of level of recruiting and how, I guess, exciting that would be for an Arkansas person to kind of be following, or how do you guys kind of see that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, you look at his history of recruiting guys. there's so many stars just in the NBA that like Calipari has a brand himself. Like him getting hired at Arkansas immediately, Arkansas was kind of cool. I mean, and it was there's a brand about him, but also these guys that he brings in, they're brought into Kentucky. They also like they go on and have big careers, and it's just like kind of this brand of like the players that played under him that they're all like one thing comes back is they're all super loyal to him. That's kind of why they wanted to go to Kentucky. And I think it is interesting to see now, like Kentucky is having some recruiting success. Like, I mean, I know Arkansas fans don't want to hear that, but they've been like landing some pretty decent people out of the portal and whatnot. But there is still very much a clear, like, Kentucky took a hit. Like, the recruiting won't be how it was with John Calipari. I'm sorry. Like, I mean, I think they would agree with that. But I think Kentucky fans are excited about it. They're like, oh, we're going kind of a different route, and we're getting different type of guys. But I think for Arkansas perspective, like talking about the fan base, like, got to be excited that you're going to have really like potential to be stars that are going to be on your campus here for a little bit. I mean, whether they're a one and done or 2 years or whatnot. You're getting stars that are going to be in Fayetteville.
And that is going to bring us to a break. I almost said that was it, but it's not it. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the men's basketball team. We're going to talk some women's basketball as well. No Stump the Bob because Bob is not here with us today. But maybe next time. See you all soon.
Get the latest breaking news on all Arkansas Razorback sports at wholehogsports.com. Our award-winning reporters and photographers go beyond game recaps to bring our subscribers the most trusted Razorbacks news anywhere. With expert analysis, the latest in recruiting, plus unique and compelling stories of your favorite teams. Subscribe today at wholehogsports.com.
Welcome back. That was loud. To the basketball podcast of Mid-America. Hope you all had a fruitful and awesome break. We're talking some Arkansas men's and women's basketball. We talked about the recruiting and kind of the portal and the freshmen kind of previously, but now kind of want to talk a little bit about Kenny Payne, kind of teaming up, rejoining John Calipari at Arkansas. Obviously, was on Cal's staff at Kentucky a while ago. And a lot of people really credited him with a lot of the success that those Kentucky teams had previously. Most recently, Kenny Payne obviously was the coach at Louisville, where things could have gone better, to say the least. But I think when you look at it, you get an associate head coach as his official title. You get somebody like him who now has head coaching experience, but has coached in the NBA, obviously been on Cal's staffs, his most successful staffs. If I'm not mistaken, he was on the national championship staff. I guess can you just talk about what you kind of think about adding Kenny Payne to the mix and what that kind of does for Cal and Arkansas?
I mean, clearly there's a long history there of like the two get along and they work well together. Some people just aren't cut out to be a head coach. Like, they're just really good assistants, in my opinion. I mean, clearly it didn't go well for him at Louisville, but I don't think that, people aren't questioning that, like, not good head coaching stint doesn't, like, disqualify you from being a good assistant. Like, there's clearly, like, proof there that he can be a good assistant. So, I think people are excited about the hire. I mean, it wasn't one that just like absolutely sweeps you off your feet, wows you after what happened with him at Louisville. But I mean, you do know that Calipari's kind of going back to like, it's just a further sign of he's bringing Kentucky here. Like he's doing what he did at Kentucky and just bringing it to Arkansas. So, yeah, I don't have a ton of opinions on it other than I do remember it's funny Eric Musselman's first game coaching against John Calipari 2020. John Calipari gets ejected from the game. And so Kenny Payne with like 8 minutes left. Arkansas at that point they had tied it, Arkansas had, and had to come back to tie it. So like the vibe in the arena was, okay, Arkansas is coming back, like they're gonna win this. You aren't gonna come back and tie it up. The other coach get ejected and lose. But then Kenny Payne and the guys, they figured it out. So That's my one real Kenny Payne memory is he was the coach on the sidelines to help Kentucky survive that. And that was the first really good crowd at Bud Walton under Eric Musselman. That was like the first time that I feel like the environment in that arena had been at that level, like in a while at least. So, yeah.
And you mentioned it, Cal maybe kind of bringing what he did at Kentucky to Arkansas. That was kind of something that a lot of people, I don't want to say were concerned about, because obviously in recent years, Kentucky didn't have the tournament success that you would kind of associate with Kentucky, obviously losing to Oakland in the first round this season, Kansas State in the second round last season, and then the year before losing to St. Peter's in the first round. But I guess can you just talk about, do you think that's a legitimate concern, or is that something that people are maybe overblowing a little bit? What are your kind of thoughts on that?
I mean, people wanted John Calipari here. Like, fans are excited because they think he can take it to places haven't been in a while. Like, we're talking Final Four and beyond. Like, that's why people are excited about him. So I get people that are like, don't do exactly what you did at Kentucky and here. But, like, you got to remember, like, he's getting transfers in right now. Like, it's not like he's carbon copying exactly like what he did at Kentucky. And Kenny Payne, it's not like he was there with him the past few years whenever they got beat by Oakland or what. I don't know. I get the concern for sure. I mean, I think that people want to see John Calipari have more success at Arkansas than he did the past few years at Kentucky. Like, they hired him, or he was hired here not for what he did the past couple years at Kentucky. He was hired at Arkansas because of what he's done in his career. And then it's crazy, though, because it's like you look at the past couple years of Kentucky, it wasn't even like that bad. I mean, the early exits in the tournament, yes, embarrassing, humiliating for that fan base and whatnot, but it's not like so many programs in the country would take those type of years where you're producing NBA players and you're highly ranked and stuff. Like, I do think that, like, there might be a little bit of, like, I mean, there's concern with, like, early tournament exits, but kind of might be a little circumstantial too, that just happened to them twice in recent history, because people get upset all the time in the NCAA tournament. They might have just fallen victim twice to, really to a team that's just, I mean, you had Golke this year just shooting out of his mind. Things like that can happen, but yeah, long answer short, I guess. I wouldn't be too worried about like, oh, he's doing exactly what he did at Kentucky, because it does seem like he's doing some things different, like with the transfer portal. And you gotta, I mean, if you're gonna recruit at a high level at Kentucky for a while, why not get some of the guys that help you recruit, like, and get those guys? So yeah.
And shameless plug, get your Hogs Illustrated magazine. There's a story that kind of touches on the end of Cal's Kentucky days in there, and kind of looks ahead to the new Arkansas era, I guess is the correct terminology. Shameless plug, because I did write that, but also Ethan did a lot of great stuff. I love the magazine in general, just to be fully, great work, everybody. But you mentioned, obviously, there's transfers. It kind of seems like the full focus now is kind of on transfers. Obviously, Jonas Aidoo coming in, Zvonimir Ivisic coming in. Brandon Garrison was another target who committed to Kentucky a little bit before we recorded this. So 2 out of 3, I guess, hits, if we want to call it that. Obviously, there's a lot of rumors surrounding Florida Atlantic's John L. Davis. Is there anybody else kind of in the portal on your radar who you think maybe would be a good target for the men's basketball team? Or
I have nothing for you. I just trust the process right now. I'm like, he's getting good transfers. Trust the process, I guess. Granted, I am not a savant of the transfer portal. I don't claim to be, nor do I. All I know is these guys that he's going after right now, I've heard of, and I'm like, awesome, because most of the time transfer portal guys that Arkansas gets in, like, I'm digging up a little bit of like, let me look into them.
That's fair. No, I will say, I think you're probably going to see at least somebody maybe come up from maybe a mid-major league. Obviously, I think some of the better transfers of John Calipari's kind of tenure at Kentucky, kind of came from the mid-major level. Obviously, you've got Antonio Reeves coming from Illinois State, from his Kentucky days. He was there last season. He was part of a not very good Illinois State team as well. So I mean, I think when you look at that kind of, I guess, talent ID, he's gonna, I think, kind of look at that. He's not gonna scoff at, a guy who comes from, the Missouri Valley or maybe Mountain West or something along those lines, A10. And there's a lot of really good guys still kind of out there. And then there's guys who are also testing the NBA draft as well. That's one thing I will say. I don't think that he's going to finalize a roster before kind of the deadline to exit the NBA draft, because I think he's going to try to get some of those guys who are, kind of testing those draft waters right now. But yeah, so I think that's kind of everything that we've got on the men's team. So kind of just switching topics over to the women's basketball team. Ethan's obviously our women's basketball savant. I kind of play backup, I guess, to Ethan on the women's side, or at least I'd like to think I try to. But if you want to talk women's basketball at Arkansas, Ethan is the king. Obviously, there's been quite a bit of turnover with the women's basketball team. Goodness, I'm mixing up my names. A lot of players entering the transfer portal. some graduations as well. I guess, can you just talk about, where that off season kind of stands at the moment, and just kind of, yeah.
Yeah. I guess we'll backtrack a little bit. I'll start with the end of their season. Talia Scott, star freshman, 5-star bucket. She can score. I mean, nobody denies she can score the ball. She was not with the team for the last, I think, 5 or 6 regular season games and SEC tournament, and cited a family emergency. Wished her well. Hope that things go well there. Don't really know what all. We really don't know what all that was about. But so didn't have her for the final stretch of the year. The team, really slips. We're in a great position to make the NCAA tournament, and just went off the rails end of the season. I mean, it was kind of hard to watch. Their Ole Miss regular season finale was an absolute just bashing, and the team struggled down the stretch. There was no denying that. Didn't have Talia. Sailor got hurt. Sailor Poffenbarger got hurt the final game of the regular season at Ole Miss. She wasn't available for SEC tournament, but so went from a few weeks left in the season from a possible NCAA tournament team to just kind of getting embarrassed sometimes. They miss out. They get bounced in the SEC tournament by Auburn by 20. They were actually pretty competitive in a lot of that game, though, which kind of surprised me. They were so shorthanded. But get bounced by Auburn, and then the transfer portal opens the next Monday, and Talia is name number 1. The portal opens, and you've got Talia, and they're okay, well, clearly wanted to try something different there. And then a few hours later, Sailor enters. So you're okay, top scorer, top rebounder down. Some time passes. They get bounced by, later that week, they lost to Tulsa in the WBIT. It's the inaugural. Think of it as the women's version of the NIT. I know it's hard to not think of the WNIT as the women's equivalent. This one's the better version. They get bounced of the WBIT to Tulsa, and after that game, Mike Neighbors says that he wants to build the team next year basically around Miriam Dowda, who is a former 5-star, went to Bentonville High School up the road, showed a lot of promise. So it's kind of the thought going into the offseason was okay, they're going to have Miriam Dowda back, they're going to try and get some pieces around her, see what they do in the portal. Got Izzy Higginbottom from Arkansas State. She can really score. She was 8th or 9th in the country last year in scoring, so great addition there. So you're okay, starting to maybe put together a little bit of a team. They're graduating Michaela Daniels, so count on a hand. I guess you lost Talia, Sailor, and then Michaela graduated, so you lose that third starter. But you got Miriam and Samara Spencer still coming back. And then this past week, they were, let's be real, they were not making noise in the portal for 3 or 4 weeks. They were hosting some people. They actually got the commitment of, her name is Vera Ojinua. Ojinawa. I think I pronounced it right. My apologies if not. Community college forward transfer. She's originally from Nigeria. They added her, but all they had was her and Izzy Higginbottom and as their transfer additions. And you got to fill. I mean, just it's the SEC. You got to get some higher. You got to get some more transfers in. And all of a sudden you lose in in 1 day, in 2 days. Samara and Miriam enter the portal. So you were down to now no returning starters. You have Izzy coming in. You have this community college transfer, and then you have Carly Keats, who played some last year, and Jenna Lawrence, who played some as a freshman. It's just getting to be slim pickings. I guess I just gave the whole timeline to you guys. There's been some tea in there in the middle, too. You asked for what's happening in women's basketball. I gave it to you. There's some tea in there, too, because Talia posted a TikTok about how wouldn't wish how she treated by upperclassmen on anybody. Started some drama. There's a lot going on there. There's so much behind the scenes, I think, that probably led to kind of the season they had where it just exploded. There's a lot there, but I guess in our women's basketball minute or 3, the current news is there isn't, Calipari a few weeks ago said, I talked to the team, there is no team, but you're like, okay, NIL and a lot of time and a lot of people you can flip from Kentucky. Right now, it's getting with women's basketball. It's like, there is a team, barely. Like, there's still some people on the team, but it's like, you got to fill up a roster at some point. I don't know I think they've been hosting some more, like, JUCO prospects, maybe a couple, maybe more international. I'm not sure the route they're on right now. I know they're kind of losing. They're losing players at a faster rate than retaining, and the ones that they're losing are the ones you really want to be returning. So, don't know what's next for them. It's not looking promising right now, but we'll see what happens. Also, they lost Pauline Love, their assistant coach, and she's been recruiting coordinator. She left for Alabama, same job. So they have an assistant coaching spot to also fill. So there's a lot that needs to happen before they can have a team next year, but I guess trust the process.
I told you guys Ethan was the king of women's basketball.
I gave. So there's the timeline. And there's a lot more in there that people who pay attention to the women's basketball team, like I just gave the whole timeline stuff, like people who pay attention to the team. And I've somehow gotten, I guess I'm talking about TikTok a lot today. But like my algorithm's gotten to be like it like knows that I cover women's basketball. So it gives me like all these accounts with all the tea. People are into this Arkansas women's basketball tea right now that care about women's basketball. So it's out there. And people who, if anybody lands across this who does care, they know that I just gave a very abbreviated version because there's a lot happening there as far as there's a lot of tea right now just of like why people are leaving. What was their, seems there was clearly not great chemistry this past year. I gave you the brief version. I will give updates of Talia landed at Auburn. Talia Scott landed at Auburn, which was not a surprise. She's I think had liked Auburn for a while. Even in the season, she was liking Auburn stuff. So, seems like that's a place she really wanted to go. And Saylor landed at Maryland, which she's from Maryland, so it's a return home for her. I think everybody's kind of happy for her, like, getting to go back home. Oh, and Jersey Wolfenbarger, who left the team before the season even started this year, just stepped away. She landed at LSU with Kim Mulkey, she's a former 5-star from Fort Smith Southside. A lot of people familiar with her, or Northside. Fort Smith Northside, not Southside. So she's at LSU now with Kim Mulkey.
And there we have it.
But
and that is all of the time we have today. Thank you all for tuning in. Much appreciated. We will see you next time on the Basketball Podcast of Mid-America. See you then. Have a great day.